Hi, I'm Randall here in Texas.
Now I'm Matt here in Michigan. Today, Randall and I are continuing our look back on the Star Wars prequel trilogy. And today we're going to number 2, Star Wars Attack of the Clones. 2002 film stars Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman, Hayden Christensen, Ian McDermott, Christopher Lee, Samuel L. Jackson, and Frank Oz. This film is directed by George Lucas. This movie is about the Republic, which is on the brink of civil war, and there's a big vote about whether or not the Republic should form its own army, and there's an assassination attempt on a senator, and 2 Jedi are trying to protect the senator and try to find out who is behind the assassination. This film cost about $115 million to make and earned $650 million at the box office. It's a Star Wars film, so yeah, people were excited to see this film. I got mixed reviews from critics. Some critics said, well, it's better than The Phantom Menace. While other ones were like, you know what, this is the worst movie in the franchise, and I kind of agree with the latter on that one a little bit. Just a little interesting tidbit about this movie. It was a big year for blockbusters in 2002. And the same year, we also saw Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, the second Harry Potter film, and Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film. So, Randall, it's been out for a while. Yeah, what do you think about
Yeah.
Attack of the Clones?
Yes. It's been out for a while. Yes. I I can't help but think to myself, I hate almost every single scene in this movie.
That's harsh, man.
I'm just putting it out there. I'm just being honest. Almost every single scene in this film is wrong. Has something wrong with it. Doesn't make sense. Has no context. Is terribly filmed, terribly acted, terribly directed. Bad special effects. I don't like this movie at
Yeah,
all.
I agree with the critics saying this is probably the worst in the film. There are some scenes I do kind of enjoy. I do like the action. There's some action scenes in it, though. Yeah, I totally agree with all your criticisms of them as well. The
They're
ones that
not
kind
that
of
good.
they're not that good. The ones
The
that kind
action
of
scenes aren't that good.
the scenes particularly that kind of stand out for me in this film. I do like the part where Anakin is going to look for his mom and then gets like the Tusken Raiders and kills the Tusken Raiders, and we come back to that. Part of the things that I like about this film are just things that hint about what's to come in the original trilogy, if I'm to be honest. I like that scene with Anakin, I guess, is because it's kind of hinting at we're actually seeing him become Darth Vader a little bit. Whereas in episode 1, I'm like, all right, this kid's supposed to be Darth Vader. And then this, where he actually, like, you know what? All right, now we're seeing a little bit of a transition into the Darth Vader. And then we see the clones and stuff, and you look at some of those scenes, like, all right, I can see the Empire coming out of this. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if you're just looking at this movie on its own by itself, yeah, it was kind of hard for me to watch through this movie again.
I will give you the first scene. I remember watching this in theaters, midnight showing, because that was a thing back then, not the day or 2 days before. Seeing the Naboo Star Cruiser with the Naboo Starfighters come in, over Coruscant and coming through the clouds, like I'm like, oh wow, I'm like mesmerized. Seriously, I'm like wow, that's pretty cool. And then it starts out with a big explosion, and you're like, oh, cool, this is completely different than the way that episode 1 started. And then right away, you get that stupid cringe-inducing,
I failed you, Senator.
no, you didn't fail. You didn't fail. You're a decoy. You literally did your job.
Yep.
Like, the first scene, the first lines spoken, basically, I guess there was no worry. It's like,
I
and
was
then explosion.
wrong. There's no danger
and,
here.
and then explosion, and you're like, wow, right away, something's wrong. Like, she didn't fail. Literally, she did her job.
she did her job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and this film is just full of that though, where it's like, wow, that doesn't make any sense. Why are they doing this? Why did they say that? And why does it look like Samuel Jackson's walking on clouds all the time?
Yeah, I mean, we just watched The Phantom Menace too, and I know Phantom Menace gets a lot of hate, but one of the points that we were giving George Lucas, at least it seems like he had a story there that there was potential. This movie, I don't know that I can really say that. I understand he's trying to get the whole, like, all right, we got to set up this war because we know this war happened. So that's something we got to set up in this film. Though we don't really know too much why the Separatists want to separate. I mean, we get a little bit of that from Count Dooku and stuff. It's hard to see where that's going. And then we also got to do this love story with Anakin and Padme, and
If that's what you call it.
they're together because I guess because they knew each other when they're kids, and Anakin is all emotion and Padme is all intellectual, so I guess they complete each other. That I don't know. I really don't know.
You complete me.
You complete me. I love you.
Oh man, it's almost hard because the film's kind of wonky and all over the place. It's hard to follow the plot, and it's hard to understand. Like, having watched it a few times, you're like, okay, I kind of get what you're saying, and you hinted at it. You said, we don't really know why the Separatists are doing what they're doing. Yet Dooku points out, like, hey, there's a Sith Lord in charge of, everything, and Obi-Wan doesn't believe him. But it's like, okay, but he's working for that Sith Lord, so, like, he might have sold some Separatists on that, but the Trade Federation in Episode 1, they were in league with the Sith Lord, and they wouldn't care. So why would they separate for that? Like, where is the political understanding of why things are happening in this film, other than just being told they're happening? And that's this film's biggest problem, in my opinion. Right away, you get Anakin and Obi-Wan, like, hey, we did this and we did that. You didn't show us that. You didn't show that they are good friends. You're telling us they're good friends. You're telling us they had all these adventures. You don't get any context in this. It's all just take it at face value because we're telling you it's this way.
One of the reasons too, Randall and I wanted to look at these films, we wanted to see after the sequels came out and the Clone Wars coming out, if we'd feel any differently about these films now than we did in the past. One thing I guess I'll look a little bit more, and it's something after Dave Filoni was saying on how important Qui-Gon Jinn's character is to Anakin Skywalker, and how in Episode 1 the Duel of Fates was so big because it would change the trajectory of Anakin. You have Obi-Wan who's training Anakin, who's more of kind of like a brother. It's like a brother thing. They're kind of competing against each other a little bit. So it's so important that for Qui-Gon to have been Anakin's mentor, because Qui-Gon really could have been a father figure to Anakin, and that's what Anakin was missing in his life. And you kind of see that in this movie now, looking back on that. I think it does look a little bit better on that point. Well, important scene in it that I mentioned was when we talk about when Anakin loses his mother. Obi-Wan's not with him because Obi-Wan is off, investigating Jango Fett and where this clone army came from and the assassination attempt on Padme. So he's not there to console Anakin, and Qui-Gon's not there to be that father figure to him when he's losing after he lost his mother. So the only person that we have there at the time is kind of Padme. As I was mentioned earlier, Anakin's just this emotion person. Throughout this whole movie, it's kind of like one-dimensional. Everything is on how he feels. He just is completely on his feelings, not really thinking about consequences or anything else. It's just he reacts. He's mad, so he's going to take out his anger. He's creepy guy. He has creepy feelings for for Padme at the beginning, and where it's kind of weird while their introduction, and Padme's kind of like, don't look at me like that. It makes me feel uncomfortable, and we still get that creepy look from Anakin afterwards. Yeah, this is a great love story, man. Great love story kind of thing. Padme, I would say, is a little bit more dynamic than Anakin. I think Anakin's helping her to trust her feelings a little bit more. So I guess we get a little bit more growth in that way. I think Padme is a little bit more of a dynamic character than Anakin in this film. And I think both Natalie Portman and Ewan McGregor do a much better job in this film than in the first film. I think they're given a more prominent role too in this film than they were in the first film as well.
Yeah, definitely Ewan McGregor. You actually start seeing him filling Alec Guinness's shoes as Obi-Wan. Definitely in episode 3 when we get there, that's something that you're going to see. One of the things about a lot of what happens in this film that just takes me out of the entire experience, we gave episode 1 a little, or maybe even a lot of credit for having some practical effects and a decent amount of practical effects that mixed well with the CGI. But in this movie, almost every single scene, if not every single scene, has CGI. And not just a little CGI. It got to the point where they're like, we're not even going to build sets. The backgrounds are CGI. The floors are CGI. Like, you might have a thing in that room, or 2 things maybe in that room, that are actual physical pieces of furniture or sets. And it takes me out of the film. It is bad. It hasn't aged well. And again, we gave episode 1 some pretty good credit for how well its special effects had aged. Episode 2 hasn't aged well at all, special effects wise, and to its detriment. It's not like you can kind of make fun of it like a B movie like Deep Rising or something like that, where you're like, look at those early 90s special effects. No. This film, the clones look bad because they kind of look like cartoons. Like I had mentioned earlier, the characters, especially the human characters, when they're walking on the rugs, it just looks like they're walking on clouds. Their feet aren't actually touching anything. The over-reliance on CGI really, really hurts this film. Even more so than the really bad script and the slightly bad acting in my mind.
I think that kind of adds to it a little bit. We could contrast back then, like you mentioned, a lot of times these actors and stuff are playing with like blue screens and stuff, and there's boxes that are colored that they're supposed to say, hey, that box, think of that box as this kind of thing. So it's kind of hard for the actor to really get that picture in their head of what they're doing, and I think that kind of comes out in the movie. I think it's a little bit different now with filming of like The Mandalorian, because they too have a virtual set, but they can see the stuff that they're supposed to be looking at. Like, they're not just looking at a box and like, hey, that's a cliff. They see the cliff, or they see the ship. Even though it's all digital, it helps the actors to actually see the physical thing that they're supposed to be seeing while they're acting out. I think that helps. Another thing, I'm glad you mentioned the clones. Not a single clone in this movie is a real person. Everything is CGI. It kind of bobbles my mind a little bit. And then other times we have characters that transition from real to CGI, and it's obvious when the switch is. The one I'm talking about in particular is Jango Fett. We'll see Jango Fett, actor in costume, and then we'll switch to a completely animated version of it, and you can tell. You're like, yeah, it's not the same, like we're hearing the same voice, and he's dressed the same way and looks similar, but that is not the real person, and that really does take you out of this movie.
Yeah, and just piggybacking on top of that, it's probably one of the worst scenes in all of Star Wars, and I wish that it would just be deleted. If George Lucas wants to go back and fix something, he can go back and fix this. Just get rid of the entire droid factory scene. It is like right up there with the episode 8 casino scene.
Canto Bite. Yeah.
It is so worthless. And C3PO and R2-D2 don't need to be there. They're just there for comic relief at a scene that desperately doesn't need comic relief. also they can have this thing where they're showing this stupid factory that makes no sense. It's not logically laid out at all. Just so Padme and Anakin can get captured. And that is completely unnecessary. It is so pointless to the film. But there it is, and it's long, and it's annoying, it hasn't aged well. Like I said, one of the worst, most pointless scenes in all of Star Wars.
I mean, Episode 1 even won awards for its special effects, and this was nominated too, but I mean, granted, there was really good movies we already mentioned that came out the same thing. The special effects and stuff didn't win in this one, and those other movies also used practical effects. Of course, I'm talking about specifically Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers. There's a lot of CGI in that movie, but it also has a lot of the practical effects. Every time we see the Urkai or whatever, it's not like they're CGI the entire movie like we have with the clones here in Star Wars. It's one thing if you're using like alien creatures and stuff, and it's creatures that you physically cannot have physical, but they're humans in, I mean, how many movies have we had stormtroopers in? I understand you don't want like a whole bunch of extras. It's easier to,
Yeah, you're not going to have a legion of real stormtroopers. We have scenes, but the close-ups,
we have scenes where like Natalie Portman is interacting with a clone trooper. That should be a real person. Granted, Yoda's completely CGI, but even when Yoda's talking to like the commanders and stuff, why can't that be a person? Why is that a CGI character?
The worst offense is when Samuel Jackson hops off of the carrier and he talks to a clone, and you can just tell he's not even looking in the right spot. And I wrote down in my notes, I'm like, did any scene in this entire film have more than one take? Or did they just be like, all right, go out, here you go, all right, it's good, cut, it's fine, it's good. Like all of the creepy looks from Anakin, is he supposed to look creepy, or is it just because George Lucas was too lazy of a director to go back and be like, we should probably do that again? You see that a lot, and it's definitely harsh to see in any interaction with the clones. It doesn't hit home. And you had mentioned the Lord of the Rings and the Two Towers came out. It's because those special effects are believable within the context. They're used well. In Episode 2, they're not used well. They don't look good on screen.
Yeah, through the majority of this film, I think a lot, especially during the dialogue, I either had my hand on my head, on my forehead, kind of thing, like, wow, or I was laughing, and it was almost like a nervous laugh, like, wow, this is bad kind of thing. At least Episode 1, I had fun watching that film. This movie was not fun for me. Watching this was more of a chore than an actual enjoyment, and I think that's really the big problem with this film.
If you're watching through all of Star Wars, I mean, you can't skip this one because important things happen. But I'd be very surprised if you sat back and you were watching this one and you said, "Oh yeah, I enjoyed my viewing experience." I'd be surprised.
Cliff notes it and then watch the Clone Wars before you watch
Cliff notes, yeah.
Revenge of the Sith, which Randall and I will get to next.
But that's for another time. That's for a different discussion. Episode 2, let us know what we did wrong. Let us know what we missed. Let us know your thoughts and feelings on it in the comments below. If you like these kinds of reviews, we've got a lot of flashback reviews. We got a whole playlist for anything that mentions Star Wars. If you like this video, give us a like, a subscribe, and ring the bell icon if you always want to know when any of our new videos are released. And also check us out on Facebook. The day before we post anything, we're going to have a post that says, this is the topic for the next video. For now, I'm Randall here in Texas. See everyone later.
And I'm Matt here in Michigan. Have a good day. Next time on No Market Media. Please consider checking out some of our other videos.